We're testing out some stuff over here. We're checking out some things. I'm going to read some of our posts. On the Added Souls Facebook page. I tried to go live on my personal profile, but it didn't work out, really. It didn't permit me to go through. At the settings we had, for some reason, it did not permit us. So we kind of tinkered around with it and figured out it's just not going to let us do that. And I'm also checking out a few things here as well, just to see if it's working properly. But it's good to have you. If you want to stick around, have ourselves a bit of a conversation. I'm going to look at some posts that we've been putting up on our Added Souls Facebook page and seeing what we can do. Seeing what we can say about that stuff, Let me see here. Just going to wait a few minutes to see if there's any kind of notifications that are going to go out. Things aren't working as well as I hoped they would, but we'll figure it out. We'll run with it. What time are we over here? We're 7:45 Atlantic Daylight Time. I don't know what time that makes over there, but I'm going to check to see. There we go. Well, it does say we're live. Yeah, it seems to be. All right, so what do we see there? So it's doing something. But it's messing around with things. It's not counting as it ought to be counting. It ain't counting as it ought to be counting. I'm testing out some widgets. Some fidget widgets. You guys familiar with widgets? I'm not too familiar with the widgets, but I'm trying some widgets. If you see this, drop a comment, say hi or something so I can see if it'll come up. And I'm also testing out my counter. See if it's counting. It's not giving me my Facebook counts. Seems to be giving me a few of the YouTube ones, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. We'll see. We'll see what happens. See who tunes in. Hello, Mary Burnett from Tennessee. I was over there in Tennessee back in, what was it now? We were there in 2017, 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and 2019, maybe a little bit of 2019. East Tennessee. It's beautiful. Was quite the experience. Very different than where we are at here, but yeah, it's good to have you, Mary. Good to have you. We're just checking out some stuff. We're going to be reading some of the posts that's on the Added Souls page, and also just, kind of want to test the platform at this time. We go live usually in the AM, right? We're usually live at 9 o'clock a.m. Atlantic Daylight Time. There was a time way back when, I suppose, when we would go live at night in the evening, and it would typically be, I think, in the weekends, but now it's mostly in the morning, obviously. But I wanted to just test things out because I had been tinkering about with our software here and seeing if we can expand certain things and just see what's going on with that. But I find it strange that it's not permitting me. Like, do I have to activate something? Let me check this out. What does this do? Well, it doesn't do nothing, does it? Nothing at all. What about this? Does that do something different? And what about this one here? What if I do that? I'm like clicking on stuff, testing out some things. Yeah, and it's not giving me the numbers, which is strange. Like if I go to take a look on the feed on the Added Souls page, then I look at my software, it's very different. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate that a great deal. That's very encouraging. It's encouraging to hear that. I try to, just pretty much share thoughts and studies and quite organic with it, transparent, just honest, seeing what's going on, and hopefully it helps us, together to learn, things like that. So I got myself there. Now I'm going to open up for fun my YouTube channel and see what's happening over there. Open up YouTube and see if our live is on there as well, because I just wanted to test two places with this one, on YouTube and also on Facebook. Okay, so there's YouTube. That seems to be rolling. But it's like it's not permitting me to share comments or things like that. So where does it go, I wonder? I'm going to have to learn a lot more of this stuff as far as the viewership counter and the spotlight, and also the the viewer count, not only the viewer count, but the chat box. Let's check out the chat box. I don't know why the chat box is not working here. It's not the chat box. It's not working. How are you guys doing? What time is it over there for all of yous? Wherever you're watching. What time is it? Here we're almost 10 minutes to 8 o'clock. Hey, Brandon. How's it going? Good to see you, my friend. Why can't I have your comments appear? Let me try something. Let me do this. And let me see if I do this. Does that start anything? Doesn't seem to start anything. I'm trying to see if we can, I'm trying to have it that when you guys put up a comment or something, it'll scroll in the screen. It's not been doing so, and I don't know why. Brendan, it's 6:49 p.m. here, East Coast time. You're an hour behind us. Not too far. Not too far at all. I don't know why it isn't working. See, because I want to see your comments on the screen. I want to see if I can put them up on the screen as well. Destination, post to all. I got that going. What if I do that? Well, that goes in favorites. But can I, put your text on the screen? I'm trying to figure out how I can put a comment up on the screen. I don't know why it's not working. I guess I'll have to learn a lot more about this. What if I do that? What if I do this? What if I do that? And I click here. Does that give me, that gives me edit. I get to edit something, but no, it's not letting me do that. What do you guys want to talk about? Talk about anything really while I do this, while I try to figure it out. See why it's not working properly. Or it should though. I don't understand why it doesn't. Do that again, do that again, and do that again. See, it's showing me all sorts of viewership there, but then it's not popping up on the screen. On the counter there. I don't know why. Well, let's just take it out then for now. Sometimes it comes and sometimes it doesn't, so it's kind of not working properly. And what if I do this? Does that do anything? Nope. Didn't do anything at all, did it? Nope. Didn't do nothing at all. I can't see your chats on the screen. I'll have to figure that out. Brandon says, if I understood right, the new elected pope is from the USA. I kind of saw that pass by the news feed. Just prior to going live. The Roman Catholic Pope. There's a new one there, isn't there? And yeah, I think I heard he was from the USA. Not that it'll change much, I think, right? Probably be the same kind of stuff, but yeah, I saw that. It's interesting. What do you guys think? A Roman Catholic Pope from the USA. Is Roman Catholicism really strong in the USA? I didn't think it was. I think what the Roman Catholics would say is that Americans are more so the Protestant type, maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that the case? What's your thoughts on that, if you have any? You have any thoughts about that? The Roman Catholic Pope being an American or whoever? What about the Roman Catholic Pope? Well, for those of us, of course, who were born and raised in Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Pope was kind of like God on earth, if you will. The head honcho. La patrone. But of course, upon sincere, honest, and genuine study, we found out that the Roman Catholic Pope's just another man. That's why they die like every other man, right? I don't think that's going to, that's not going to change. They can call themselves, God on earth, and I know they don't utilize that in that descriptive way, but, the vicar of Christ, the infallible, the high royal, this, that, and the other, kiss the ring kind of stuff. But he's just a man. He's just a man. And the last one who departed, he met his maker, just like all men will. We depart from this earth, and we face judgment, if you will. And that's what the scriptures say. But depending on which, of course, religious worldview you hold, which mostly out there to be found is the type of religious view that does not truly take the scriptures as the sole source of religious authority. Typically, that's not what you commonly hear. There are certain denominations that will say, well, we just do what the Bible says. But upon further investigation, you can see that truly they don't. They might take some verses to heart, no doubt. John 3:16, it seems to be the one that has to be the real one in the Bible. But when it comes to many other verses, it doesn't seem to be the case. It just doesn't seem to be the case. But, it is what it is. There'll be a Roman Catholic Pope and a new Roman Catholic Pope after the last one departs. It's been that way for millennia, and it'll continue to be that way until, of course, the end of time. There will be an end to all of this, no doubt. I mean, the scriptures speak quite clearly about that day. It's a day you and I don't know. Some men try to claim they do know. That's just pride or greed or, they're trying to get something from you, obviously, and trying to take advantage of you. And if you find yourself in a vulnerability, they will exploit that. They'll exploit your weakness. They can't get to you, though, if you know the Bible. That's one thing. You can easily fall prey and be devoured by all kinds of, religious fanaticisms and extremes and lunacies, if you will, or deceptions. Some that might masquerade themselves quite cunningly so as the truth, when in fact it doesn't stand up to the reality of rightly handled words in the scriptures. But, people will have free will. They choose what they want to choose. Brandon says, there's quite a few Catholic churches in my area, but I don't think it's as popular here in the U.S. As compared to Europe and whatnot. Yeah, I didn't kind of get that vibe when I was stateside for several years. Catholicism didn't seem to be the majority over there at all. I mean, there were pockets of Catholics, no doubt, and I've spoken to some that said, yeah, I'm a Catholic. But I don't think I think I saw a Catholic church in Wisconsin, I think, when I was there. But I didn't really, more than that, I didn't see a whole bunch of Catholic churches. Over here, of course, 40 years ago, we were born in Catholic churches everywhere, and everyone went to church at the Catholic church, and we were all Catholics. That's what we were born and raised in. More of a European model kind of thing, and Roman Catholicism was just the prominent religious worldview. It still is here. It's not as strong. It's not as prominent. It's been, trickled down, and because again, it kind of goes with it ebbs and flows with the culture. So it's not like solid in doctrine like the scriptures are or the Word of God. It's just the minds of men, and the minds of men change with time, and so it's just not as strong as it was. It's not as strong as it was even in our community where I was born and raised. I think they closed the doors, to be honest with you. I think they did. They were trying to raise, community support to keep the doors open, but folks was not interested anymore. The generation prior to us, they were, our grandparents, strong, but then our parents not as strong, and then the children from our parents and their children and our children, just not at all. Didn't see any use of going to mass, going to church. Just not raised to think it important. And sometimes just because of the sheer hypocrisy of it all, we can't question things. It doesn't make sense. Why did we do this? Why did we do that? So, got apathetic about it, got idle, and no longer going there. So it closed its doors. Hey, Tommy, good to see you. Tommy says, we have quite a few in our area. Really? Interesting. Hey, Lee, good to see you. Lee says, I think there are areas where Catholicism is more prevalent in the United States. New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and California have higher rates of Catholicism. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? How that functions. It's kind of like, there may be a connection. There may not be. I tend to think there is, and I probably could formulate evidence to that end, to my opinion. But, more so liberal-leaning locations, provinces, or states tend to embrace Catholicism, which is strange because we do have Catholics that are like strong conservative politically, pro-life and all that kind of stuff. But it seems though in more so format, New York and New Jersey, like, on the east of the state, on the east side of the states and way on the west side of the states would embrace Catholicism a lot more. Catholicism tells you pretty much you can do what you want to do, you go to heaven. It's the perfect religion, right? You don't really need to show up and do anything. You don't need to really be a practicing Catholic to go to heaven. You don't need to be a Catholic to go to heaven. Everyone goes to heaven according to Catholicism. That wasn't always the case, though, by the way. Like you obviously always had an opportunity to get to heaven one day, but there was a time where moral code was upheld, and there were things that would stop you, obviously, from having an immediate eternal life, stuff like that. Absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, so my little widgets aren't working. I was hoping they'd work. I was hoping that we could see the chat box and have comments, but apparently it's not working. I don't know why. I attached them, but strange. Brandon says, I'm now thinking we might have a few Catholic churches in our area because of the college, Notre Dame, being a Catholic college. Yeah, Notre Dame. Some with Bethel College in our area, which is another Catholic college in our city. Yeah. I watch a few. A few. I think I watch one prominent podcaster, Matt Walsh. That's kind of where I get my news. It's the only thing. I'll turn on Matt Walsh throughout the week and just listen to his podcast session and be like, okay, I'm up to date with the news. But I think he's a Catholic, if I'm not mistaken. I think he said so anyways. He'd be more so of a morally upright Catholic. And you get those. I prefer those. We were born and raised in Catholicism. My family, our community, there was only one church, Catholic Church. And we were like, it taught moral uprightness. Like it taught you right and wrong, love mom and dad, be kind to your neighbors, all that kind of stuff. The golden rule stuff. And it served us well while we practiced it, no doubt. But then we got bored with that, so kind of moved away from it. But Catholicism also like built our schools, taught us stuff. I remember still going to school as a little kid, and you'd stand up and recite a prayer and, go through the traditions of Catholicism. I still remember the priest would come, once in a while. You go confess your sins, it was a Catholic school, Catholic community, Catholicism everywhere. And for the most part, what I was able to recognize, was decent. There was no issue with the priest or stuff like that. The priest actually was a very kind man, a very decent man from my memory and from those I've spoken to in the community. They just said, yeah, he was a kind man. He was a loving man. He sadly died of cancer quite young. I remember when we permitted the Bible to enter the household, right? Dad permitted the gospel, the true, pure gospel, to enter the household. And, Mom and Dad made a decision, we can't keep following this path anymore. It's not leading to heaven, it's a difficult decision because, to go away from what you were born and raised in, the religious worldview you were born and raised in is a devastating thing in a community like ours, where, it's a small little community and everyone knows everyone, and we all know the families, we all know the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and the moms and the dads. Like I grew up in the street with two families, my family and a buddy of mine's family, so if you were going to no longer be going to mass, and if you're no longer a Catholic in a Catholic community, I mean, you're going to raise some eyebrows, no doubt. And back then, man, you're could get a lot of trouble, a lot of persecution for that. And I remember it. But, Mom and Dad, they made the right decision. They said, we're going to go away from what is not doctrinally sound, from going away from a church that Jesus never built, and going away from teachings that Jesus never taught. And it was the best decision, no doubt, permitting the true, pure gospel to enter the house. But that meant Mom and Dad weren't going to be Catholics anymore. So we weren't going to be going to, any Roman Catholic Mass or anything like that. And, you get shunned a lot. You get, pushed away and ridiculed and mocked. And persecution comes with that. But after a while, it settles down and folks just accept it, Didn't get violent, didn't get physically assaulted or stuff like that. There are locations in the world that still happens. But we didn't go through anything physical that way. But, so we're just reading the scriptures, and you kind of just, when you read the Bible long enough, you kind of figure it out. Like, ooh, this book is either wrong and Catholicism is right, or this book is right and Catholicism is wrong. And it's a difficult thing to kind of go against the grain that way when you were born and raised with an ancestral lineage that has been Catholics all your life. And it was difficult. It was difficult on Mom and Dad, no doubt. They didn't really have any friends anymore. I mean, everyone's Catholic. If you're not a Catholic, then you're not part of the community anymore that way. And it's not that everyone was a practicing Catholic. It's kind of like, if you're no longer a Catholic, Catholicism sees it as a betrayal of your own kind and family and tradition. Oh man, tradition, the Holy Mother Church and tradition. But all of us were very ignorant to it. We just trusted what the priest said, You're born into it. You think this is what Christianity is. And we didn't even call it Christianity. But it was so strange when we were young because we were Catholics. I still remember when my parents converted to pure Christianity, like following Jesus that's in the Bible. And they were just called Christians. And that was a different name in the community. No one what do you mean you're a Christian? We're Catholics. What do you mean Christian? Now, of course, everybody calls themselves Christians. I mean, even the Mormons call themselves Christians. And the Mormons don't even believe that Jesus, the Christ, is God. They think him to have been a created being somehow. They call themselves Christians. I mean, let's give each other enough time. There'll be atheists calling themselves Christians. I'm an atheist Christian. I'm a Christian atheist or something. But yeah, we were just, born and raised to think Catholicism was Christianity, and it was right. And if we remain to be Catholics, we'll go to heaven one day. Most people, all my family, all my kind, many of them passed away now too, and friends and whatnot. I mean, they pass away. You go to a Catholic funeral, and the priest does his voodoo stuff, and that's it. Ushers the individual to heaven. Well, if you don't question that, you remain in ignorance and you think it okay. But factually speaking, you start to do some studies and you find out that you find out how Roman Catholicism began. And from Roman Catholicism, you find out the Protestant movements protesting against Catholicism and the branches that came out of the first recorded denomination, Catholicism. Then you kind of see where all the others came about, from Anabaptists, the Baptists, the Pentecostals, the Wesleyans, the House of Nazareth, Salvation Army, Gospel Halls. There's just so many of them, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And they are pretty much offshoots of Catholicism, all of them. Many of all these different religions that would be considered under the umbrella of Christendom, they're just kind of mishmashes of all kinds of different things. Catholicism being the big one, because the Catholicism was the first departure. And it happened, of course, centuries after Jesus had already built his church. Like, Jesus built his church in the first century, on the day of Pentecost in 30 AD. Yes, I know some say 33 AD. I say 30 AD. And, the apostles, the 12 apostles, they were endowed miraculously by the governance or the governing power of the Holy Spirit that was poured out upon them. And they proclaimed the keys, the conditions for legal citizenry in the kingdom of the Christ, the church that belongs to Christ. All of this is recorded, of course, in inspired history, inspired literature. And you can go to that in Acts chapter 1 and 2. And it was kind of promised to them in John chapter 14 through 17. And it certainly happened exactly like it was recorded there in history. But what happened with Catholicism is that came about centuries after the fact. But of course, if you're born and raised as a Catholic, we were taught that, we are the Holy Mother Church. Peter was the first pope, and, Catholicism's been there since day one, since the first century, but it's just not true. It's just not factual. I know it's difficult to hear that. It was difficult for us to even conceive that. Sometimes you're like, you're not even willing to entertain the thought that maybe what's being said here and maybe what you're hearing could actually be true. Have you ever thought about that? Are you an honest enough person and a humble enough person to say, you know what, maybe we're wrong religiously? It's a scary thought, right? It's the same with politics. You just don't want to change parties, right? You're loyal to a certain party. You're loyal to a certain religious worldview. Not gonna want to see any other kind of worldview, but this kind of worldview. And you'll remain lost and ignorant that way. That's it. You'll remain lost and ignorant that way. Won't be able to learn anything, and grow. You have to kind of say, there's nothing wrong with it either. What do you say, maybe what I was born and raised in to believe religiously is not right. Maybe I was taught wrong. Or maybe I was taught right. And maybe what I do believe is spot on. In today's culture, and cultures prior to it, we kind of go in circles at times in our history, but some, you say, well, how do we know the truth? Who knows the truth? No one knows the truth ultimately, so you make up your own truth. And again, then you fall prey to the isms we mention so often, relativism, pluralism, emotionalism. There is no truth, so I'll create my own truth because I feel it's my own truth. And there you go. You're done. You're cooked. It's over. Game over. You've bought into the lie. You've bought into the deception, right? So I'm going to, since there is no truth, I'm going to create my own personal truth, and it's going to be my own personal truth because I feel it, and then you roll with that. You think that's, solid, and the day comes when you depart this earth, which is going to happen. You can't run away from that, and you're face to face with reality, a very sobering reality, and you're begging God for another opportunity to go back on earth. Let me try this again. It's not gonna. There's no There's no second opportunity with life. That's why it's so precious. That's why it's so precious. We've been given this existence. It's very precious. Some folks, they see it the wrong way. We only got one life to live, man. Party up. Well, we actually have two lives to live, to be quite accurate. We have this one in these physical vessels that we experience right here and now. But once our physical vessels expire and go back to the dust they came from, our souls, our spirit, depart the physical vessel, and they go onward to the heavenly realm. And therein you meet the Maker, and you will know your sentencing, basically. If you chose to neglect and reject the Christ, the Messiah, whom is love, God, well, your decision will be honored, and you will have eternal punishment. There's no returning back on earth for another opportunity to get it right. Catholicism, of course, would teach us we have another opportunity in purgatory, but purgatory is a lie. It's always been a lie. It's an ear-tickling lie, because, who doesn't want to hear that? I can live like I want to live here and try to do it. Try to be a good person. You'd hear that very commonly in the community. Friends, family, Oh, he's a good devil. He's not a rapist or a murderer, but, he likes a good drink once in a while. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. God's grace, God's love, God's forgiveness is, it comes with the structure and order of a law. Does God love everyone? Yeah, everyone created in the image of God, God loves. But God's not going to go against his nature and extinguish his justice, his judgment. He can't do that. It wouldn't be loving if he did. So the love of God upholds justice. And so if we fool ourselves to think, well, there is no truth, and because there is no truth, I'm just going to create my own truth, and the reason I'm going to know it's my own truth is because I feel it is, and that's what I'm going to roll with. Again, the isms: relativism, pluralism, emotionalism. You're going to have a pretty harsh reality when you meet the Maker. No, listen, there is the truth, an objective, absolute reality. There is the truth. The world can try to convince us there isn't, but there is. There is, and we cannot rely on our own selves and our own works. We can't say, well, I've been a good person. I never raped anyone. I never murdered anyone. I'm a good person, so therefore God is going to let me into heaven. It doesn't work that way. I know that's how we were taught. Many of us, that's how we were taught. We grew up that way. For us, that's how we were born and raised to believe. But it's just not true. See, Roman Catholicism came centuries after the church Christ built. And you don't need to be some sort of genius to get this, man. If I can get it, you can get it. Trust me. You just need to read, though. You need to read, though. You need to take the time to read. Well, I don't have the time. Of course you have the time. We waste time on everything else. You have the time. You sit down, you start reading Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. You find a Bible. Just start reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Read the Gospels. You cannot, if you're an honest person, there's no way you're going to read through those Gospels and think Roman Catholicism is the church that Jesus built. Matter of fact, you're going to find out real quick that it just cannot be the church Jesus built, because it isn't. It just is not. But you have to read it for yourself, which is why, again, Roman Catholicism for a long time in their history did not want us peasants to read the Bible. They were the gatekeepers. They don't want us to read the Bible. If we read the Bible, we're going to start thinking for ourselves, aren't we? Get independent. And so what happened, of course, is when Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, when he fulfilled the gospel and accomplished the prophets' prophecies, and he just, the gospel was set, his church was built, he was crowned king of his kingdom, and everyone who was hearing the words of instruction, the condition, the keys to entrance, those who embraced those words, well, they acted upon those words because they believed what they were hearing from the Holy Spirit through the vessels known as the apostles. They believed that because the evidence was being provided. So when they heard the evidence being provided and they understood the evidence being provided, they were like, oh, okay, yeah. An honest individual is going to do that. An honest individual who is humble enough to transparently, very genuinely, seeking is going to understand this. So they receive the words, and upon the reception of their words, believing in Jesus, pierced with the information they had heard, well, they were immersed. That's kind of the faith we have in Jesus, that he'll save our soul. We are immersed into his kingdom. It's the location where saved individuals are found. Because when you go down into that immersion, that burial, your faith in Jesus Christ, Christ sees your faith in action, and he operates on you spiritually. Colossians 2:12. He clothes you with his love, his forgiveness. Galatians 3:26 and 27. That's why it's so necessary to be buried like he was in the grave, right? Like he was buried in the grave. Like the idea, of course, he was taken from the cross and put in the tomb, and he rose from the dead. Well, you are being plunged, you're being dipped. Our faith in Christ, that's who's saving us. Christ, by the way, that's the sole source of our salvation is Jesus Christ. So we trust in Jesus Christ, we believe in Jesus Christ, we trust in him. So we're like, yeah, I'll do whatever you instruct me to do, because I want to be saved. I want you to save my soul. And so that's what they did there in the first century, when you can read it in the account of the day of Pentecost. And so they were buried, Romans 6:3 and 4. They were buried in the tomb, a spiritual occurrence taking place by our faith, saved by grace through faith. And those people, those souls who accepted the words that were being spoken by the Holy Spirit through the vessel, the apostles, they went down into that water to be born again out of water and the Spirit. And when they came up out of that water, they were, legal citizens of the kingdom of the Christ. And the scriptures, witnessed and recorded, would say 3,000 souls were added to the church that day. So 3,000 souls said, we sinned against God, and we need to do what's right, and we need to do it right now. So what do we need to do? And of course, Peter and the apostles told them, hey, listen, you got to change the way you think. All your past religious worldviews and ordinances and traditions and shrines and all these things, the things you were born and raised thinking you were believing in, your ancestry was believing in, your mom and dad, your grandma, grandpa, you got to let all that go, because that stuff led to Jesus being hung on a cross. All that kind of stuff led to, and in its practical application today, let's say, like in the first century, okay, he's speaking to the Jews and Judaism and the ordinances of the Sanhedrin and all that kind of stuff. But in practical application, which God has blessed us with a thinking mind to understand the logic from it, in its practical application today, it's pretty much like speaking to the ocean of denominationalism out there, if you will, just the ocean of all sorts of religious worldviews mishmashed together. And there's a lot of decent people in there. A lot of decent people, some kind people, benevolent people, loving people. I mean, people that give you the shirt off their back kind of people, just very kind people. But they're snared in a system. Like back in the day, in the first century, you would have found yourself with some very decent, loving, kind Jews who were part of the system of Judaism and would have followed the instructions and the traditions and the ordinances of the elders and the chief priests and whatnots. And you would have considered them a good neighbor. Like, it's just kind, hospitable brother. But ultimately, the things they were believing in is the issue. The things they were holding on to is the issue. And what they were holding on to ultimately led Christ to being crucified. Because there were many at the helm of those religious systems that had since deviated in all sorts of factions, all sorts of schools of thought. They were interpreting the scriptures to their own image. And that's what happens all the time as well. Like we tend to think we have to interpret the scriptures to our own ambition. And so we create our own personal little Jesus there that's going to do what I tell him to do. Well, they had since done that as well. They had since created their own Christ. He's going to come here and he's going to look like we want him to look like. He's going to say the things we want him to say. And many of them, of course, were in this kind of nationalist mind that we're going to slay down the Roman oppression with a sword, and we're going to once again set forth Judaism as its national state and all this kind of stuff. And that's not what happened. Jesus did not come in the image they had interpreted from the Old Testament text. They had interpreted the Old Testament text in such a way that Jesus would come in their own image, that he'd be a Pharisee or a Sadducee. He'd be, socio-politically involved with the Sanhedrin somehow, and he wasn't. He was not at all. He came in the image, of course, of the Scriptures revealing, and God on earth, and that's how galvanized we become at times with the religious ocean that's out there today under Christendom, all these different denominations, and there are so many of them. And again, you'll find decent people there, but the things they believe has ultimately led Christ to being crucified. Is the things they believe are not accurate. They're hostile, actually, against Christ. Like, Christ came on this earth as his being, and his life has been witnessed and recorded in the Scriptures if we read them in accordance to the author's intent for our minds. See, we're permitting the book to teach us, not us trying to make the book say what we want it to say. An individual who is of an independent accountability and the capability of thinking for oneself can see that quite clearly. So, in essence, again, in practical or in principle, today we do the same thing. We've brought Christ to the cross because of our misguided religious beliefs that may masquerade themselves as decent. And some of them are decent moral beliefs, but they don't necessarily belong or guide us towards heaven if they are not found in the proper spiritual location. And most individuals snared in denominationalism are not aware of the spiritual location Christ built. Like the uniqueness of the church Christ purchased. Again, we were speaking about this. He bled for his bride. His bride is his church. His church is made up of all the individuals who sought to love him and believe in him and love him and be immersed into his kingdom. And this took place in the first century, 30 AD. Again, some say 33 AD. Okay, 30 AD. But Roman Catholicism, going back there to kind of connect some dots, if you will, Roman Catholicism came centuries after the fact. So Jesus builds his church, right, 30 AD, in Jerusalem, under the reign of the Roman Empire. In other words, the church that Christ built, it was built and its doors open in Jerusalem, and this was during the age of the Roman Empire. And, of course, would you know it? The prophets prophesied this centuries prior to the fact with precision. Its location, its condition, the way it was going to be formed. And it happened just like that. 2,000 years ago, just like that. And so the church Jesus said he would build, he built it. He bled for it. And everyone since then who has followed the instruction of the Christ have become legal citizens of his unique church. So here's his unique church in the first century in Jerusalem during the reign of the Roman Empire, and this happened with great outpoured power from the Holy Spirit upon the 12 chosen vessels, the apostles, who stood up and proclaimed the good news of the Christ. And those who received those words were immersed into Christ. Now, centuries after the fact, like this took place in the first century, 30 AD. Now we're fast forwarding now centuries, 130, 230, 330. The Roman powers sought to bring a peace treaty of sorts, if you will, so that the people would have a universal belief and system. Now, this would, of course, give the Roman powers political influence over the people, but they saw it as a way to micromanage the citizenry. So they formulated through the Roman governing powers and certain leaders of the Jewish persuasion and certain leaders of the pagan persuasion, and also certain elders who had since withdrawn themselves from the church that Christ had purchased, because they once were members of the church Jesus had built. They were elders in local assemblies that Jesus had built, and they withdrew themselves from that spiritual refuge in order to associate themselves in cooperation with Jewish powers and pagan powers, together with the Roman powers. This is all history. I'm speaking it probably in a common tongue with a lot of surface talk, but you can really dive deep into this stuff. I have many years ago. I've lost a lot of memory over it, but remembering a lot of stuff of it. But it's all history. It's fact. Like you can actually read through this. And so they got together, these powers, if you will, and the formation of the Roman Catholic Church had birth. It had begun, and you can read of all the forefathers of all these different movements or belief systems that came to be and are widely distributed and accepted now today. But Roman Catholicism was not the church Jesus built at all. Now, we were born and raised to think it was, but it just, in reality, in its most tangible, defendable reality, it just isn't. It never has been. It never will be. But from the Roman Catholic, the universal religion that came about from, again, powers getting together for a universal acceptance and persuasion, influence, from that, some saw the discrepancy, saw the deficits, they saw the contradictions, they saw the hypocrisy, and they said, this is wrong. This cannot be the church Jesus built. This cannot be the Christ. Because the scriptures, of course, they had and were being written and compiled in the first century, the New Testament system, which came to its completion, of course, the perfect law of liberty. And that was available in certain pockets in certain ways, and they could formulate a thought and say, hey, listen, I don't think Catholicism's the way. And so they protested against Roman Catholicism. And though the thoughts of the men at that time may have been sincere, like they may have had a genuine, sincere heart in saying, Catholicism's wrong, I need to expose that and go a different direction. And throughout history, of course, men snared in various religious falsehoods. Some have been sincere men, kind, decent men. Some have been malicious, abusive, manipulative, unrighteously cunning, and stuff like that. But so let's put into a perspective that the men who saw Roman Catholicism, after a while, they were like, this is wrong. They protested against that. And then various other branches of quote unquote Christendom were being formulated. And there's a pretty cool timeline chart. I think over at WVBS, World Video Bible School. It may be .com or .org. I forget now, but and I've used that poster, if you will. I've purchased it. It's a well-rounded poster of our history religiously, and it kind of shows the first departure. It shows the first church built, which was the Christ. The Christ built his church, and you see that timeline. And then after centuries, you see the Roman Catholicism come about. And from Roman Catholicism, you start to see splinters away from that. And from that, then you see, it kind of brings it to today's age with all the various different departures, none of which belong to Jesus Christ. None of them do. They are firmly convinced they do. They were born and raised to believe they do. But in reality, and all of this will be made really, really clear to every single soul when the sky opens and it's Judgment Day. Or when an individual departs this earth, whichever comes first, it becomes very clear. Someone says, well, how can you be so certain? How can you know that? Because I believe the Bible. I've stopped believing men. I've stopped falling prey to all sorts of denominational doctrines. And I was set free by the information of the scriptures. You can't fool me anymore. It doesn't mean I know everything. It doesn't mean I'm some kind of genius and scholar. No, I'm just a common Joe, blue-collar guy. It's because once you learn 1 + 1 makes 2, nobody's going to fool you that it makes 3. It's that kind of system. It's just Once you see it in the Bible, because you're looking for it, number one, it's so plainly, rightly handled right before your eyes. Jesus built one kind of a church. You know what that looks like because you've studied it. You recognize it. Kind of like, I know what my wife looks like. So even if I am at the shopping mall with all kinds of women everywhere, and I've said this many times, but even if I'm in that shopping mall, there's all kinds of women everywhere. Women have ears, women have noses, mouth, eyes, legs, bodies. They all have the same thing, right? So, does that now mean they're all my wife? Does that mean I can come home with several of them because they all have the same? No, my wife is quite different. She's unique to me in that crowd of women. So I know specifically what she looks like. So she's the one I'm going home with. Well, Christ purchased with his own blood his bride, his church. He knows exactly what she looks like, what she sounds like, her description. Everything that is not his wife is not going to go to heaven. But that doesn't mean they don't have ears and eyes and noses. But that don't make it the bride of Christ. Many churches out there, from Roman Catholicism to the Protestant movement and everything in between, they may have eyes and ears and stuff like that. They may say the name Jesus. They may speak of a church. But they're not the church Jesus built. And you can tell the difference by the study you do within the scriptures, speaking of the uniqueness of the church Christ built. It's very different. It's very different. It's very different. Today, prominent denominational beliefs is just rampant everywhere. But they don't belong to Jesus. They tell themselves they do, but they do not. And that's a difficult one. Well, that's just your interpretation. That's just your belief. Okay. You keep going with what you believe, and I'll believe what I want to believe, and we'll see how it all ends up. I need God's grace as much as anybody else, but I can read a book, and I can study it. And if we are honest with each other, we can absolutely understand it and move forward. And when you do that, you recognize the uniqueness of the church that belongs to Christ. That's why we call ourselves we are identified, more so accurately, we are identified as the church that belongs to Christ. Now, it's a fact that the devil's influence has many churches out there that say Church of Christ or the Church of Jesus Christ or the church that belongs to God or the Church of God. They'll obviously, the devil's going to want to have you fully convinced that the church you're going to belongs to God. So they're going to put it up on the sign outside. They're going to make sure to emphasize that. But once you really start to study religion, it begins so confusing because there's so many of them and there's so many religious systems out there that claim Christianity. It's very, it's a pretty heavy burden because it's so confusing. You're like, how am I going to make sense of this? But trust me, the more you study, the more it narrows its way down so simple. Like you can start to just really, oh, I'm a Christian. You're a Christian? How did you become a Christian? And then they tell you, and you're like, you know they're not a Christian. You know they're not a Christian. What church do you go to? They tell you the church. You know it's not the church Jesus built. Like it becomes so simple. Not because we're, again, some kind of enlightened, how should I say, miraculously enlightened people or anything like that. No. It's really boots to the ground. You read the Bible. You understand the Bible. You know what it says. And you identify what's true and what's not. It's really as simple as the Bible would say something like, fornication is a sin. And someone says, well, fornication is not a sin. Well, you're wrong. The Bible's right. Well, that's just your interpretation, and I'm going to keep believing that fornication is not a sin. Okay. There's no reason to get angry at each other here. I don't have the power to send you to hell. You will meet the one who can and will, but that's not me. So, okay. I'm not going to fight with you anymore. There was a time I would have argued with these people time and time again, not out of a malicious heart. I thought I was really doing something good, that I was sincerely thinking I have to debate all these people who don't want to know anything about the gospel. They're not looking for the truth. They're fully convinced in their own deceptions, like in their own minds they're right. They're filled with pride. And here I am wasting nights. I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping. Time and time again, weeks and months and years. Just useless. Well, okay, not useless. I learned a whole bunch of stuff. I learned how to defend the gospel real good, so it wasn't useless. But did it change the individual's hearts? Well, barely. Not really. So yeah, I mean, someone says, how is it that the East Coast congregation there is growing so well? Because God, it's God's church, number one, and he's bringing the growth, number two. And we're focused on people who want to learn. I know it's crazy, right? Because some brethren are fully convinced that the only way you grow is if you argue with everyone who doesn't want to learn. Somehow you're going to try to persuade them to learn. No, if their hearts are galvanized this hour, they don't want to learn, just move on. You're wasting your time. It doesn't matter if it's your own spouse, if it's your own child, or if it's your own grandparents. Go, leave them be. Don't forget about them, no doubt. Keep praying for them and always be ready to build a bridge if they have questions. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not telling you to throw them off a cliff or anything. That belongs to other religious views, other barbaric religious views that are found in the world. But for us, it's just, okay, I'll pray for you, man. I'm not going to fight with you. I don't believe what you believe. Okay. I don't want to believe what you believe. Okay. We can still be friendly to each other. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Okay. I am going to bring it up, though, if you push me there, but all right. We've been focusing on people who want to learn, people who come to the table and saying, I just want to know who Jesus is, man. I want to follow the Jesus that's in the Bible and out there in the world. I've been to every church. For a while, I was this church. For a while, I was Catholic for a while. I was a Baptist for a while. I was a Pentecostal for a while. I even went to the Mormon church for a while, or the Jehovah's Witnesses for a while. Then I went to the Gospel Halls for a while. Then I went to... I'm just looking for the truth, and everywhere I've been going, it doesn't seem to be doing what I read clearly in the Bible. Okay, you're in the right place now. You're disenfranchised with the errors out there. You're disenfranchised with what is not true. So now you're kind of seeking the truth. Yeah, well, now we can sit down. We can have a conversation. Let me share with you what I went through and learned as well. So together we can read a verse, and we can explain the verse, and we can understand the verse, and that gives us strength, faith, moving forward. See, we focus on people who want to learn now. That's the big difference. That's how we're growing. And people who want to learn are the people who are capable of hearing these kind of sessions as a Catholic, as a Baptist, as a Pentecostal, as a Wesleyan, as a Methodist, as a Salvation Army, as a this, or that, and say, well, what he's saying don't sound so crazy to me, because I kind of feel like he feels. Well, welcome to the party, pal. You're starting to think for yourself. It's fun, isn't it? We're starting to question things, aren't we? Again, we're not saying that everyone that's out there in those churches that Jesus never built are all purposely, high-handedly, rebelliously evil people. And we're not betraying family, familial associations or social activities. We're just saying what you believe and what we've been taught to believe is not true, and it's not leading us to heaven. It's been telling us it's about Jesus, but it's really not. And we just want to learn the truth. So let's read the truth and follow the truth. See what the truth has to say. I want to go back to the church Jesus built in the first century. I want to go back to Jerusalem where I can read the words. And again, that's another big one you have to start. There's no way. See, that's why you have to have such an honest heart and a seeking heart. Because you have to come to the conclusion, which is evidence-based, that the 66 books of the Bible is the fulfilled and complete perfect law of God. He wrote it for us. It came from his mind. It's of a miraculous power. The Bible is sourced by a miraculous divine power and authority. You're holding a bulk of supernatural literature. You are. If you have faith, of course. If not, well, it's just a bunch of words, old words, ancient words. But if you're truly seeking, if you're truly searching for it, if you really want to know, oh yeah, you'll get it. It'll change your life. And you'll start to recognize that the Bible is the truth and everyone who is outside the Bible is not the truth. That's why religious error ultimately do not want you to trust in the Bible and the Bible only. They don't want you to do that. Because if you do that, you'll start to figure it out. They don't want you to do that. So we want to travel back to Jerusalem to the first century and take a look at where Jesus built his church and what his church looks like and how people got into that church. Because it's a spiritual house that can be seen through these physical vessels together collectively. There is one church Jesus built. He built his church. He said he would. No, Peter's not the first pope. No, Jesus did not build the Roman Catholic Church. That was inserted in there, and it was cunningly taught to us, and we believed it. But it's not reality, and I assure you, if you open that book again, it'll say things you didn't think it was saying. Read it for yourself. Jesus built his church. He did, on the day of Pentecost, recorded in the first century. His church is descriptively revealed in the Bible. 66 books, 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 books in the New Testament. You and I, we live under the law of the 27 books of the New Testament, and we are commanded to learn from the 39 books of the Old Testament as well. Why? Because we see God's nature and plan. We see God's mind. We see man who is faithful to God, and we see man who is rebellious against God. We see the curses and the blessings. We see the ancestral theme of love to come, which was the Christ. He came. And we see his church established because his kingdom, it was birthed from the mind of God from the beginning. It was prophesied by the prophets of old. It was promised by the Christ, purchased by his blood, and must be practiced by our faith. And this one kind, unique church that Jesus built has many local assemblies around the world of the same kind. Paul himself speaking to Christians in the first century, Romans, the letter Romans chapter 16, the churches of Christ. Now, that's not a sign on the wall. He was saying the churches that belong to Jesus. It's descriptive. It's descriptive. Comments. Lee says, I knew a woman who became angry after attending the Church of Christ because the preacher's teaching says that my grandparents are going to hell because they're Lutherans. What do you do to counter that attitude? It's a difficult one, isn't it? And I've come across that many, many times. Are you saying that my grandparents are damned or my parents are in hell right now because their memory of their parents may have been very kind and good and benevolent and loving? Tender. They miss them dearly and love them dearly, and the thought of thinking that they're in a bad place forever is just, I'm not ready to accept that. So therefore, they get angry and offended. How you mean to tell me? Listen, I am not God. I am not the one sending them to heaven or hell. God wrote his mind on paper, and he bound himself to it. God indeed created a rock he could not lift, his word. He is bound by his word. He cannot contradict his word. And his word so plainly states that his son is crowned king of his kingdom, his church. And you cannot go to heaven in any other but his. That's all there is to it. And here's how we approach this. Did you love your parents, your grandparents? Yes. Why not honor their name? If they are in eternal punishment, do you think they want you to follow them there? You love them, right? Yes. You honor them? Yes. Do you have fond memories of them on this earth? Yes. If they are in eternal punishment because they were not legally with Christ, in other words, they were not immersed into the church Christ built, faithful to the spiritual refuge and blessings of His Majesty's grace. Do you think they want you to follow them to that same location? Or do you think they are screaming from the grave saying, please don't do that. Please follow Jesus. Please do what the Bible says instead. Don't follow what we did. Well, I know the answer. It's not because I'm so smart of anything. It's because the Bible actually reveals a window to the afterlife. There's an actual account of a man who departed this earth in the wrong condition and went to torment. And he's begging God, please go tell my brothers not to follow where I've came. Please tell them not to do this. You know what God told him? You know what God told the man that was in torment? He said, they've got the Bible. If they aren't going to believe the Bible, nothing I say is going to change that. That's the same answer today. Our grandparents, our parents, our siblings who have departed this earth, and I have many that I miss dearly. But I'm not going to lie to you. The Scripture's not going to lie to us. They are in heaven. They just aren't. And I know as a fact they don't want me following them where they're at. I know that much because I love them and I honor them, and I know they're screaming from the grave, Stefan, don't come here, man. Don't do it. We messed up and we can't go back. My aunt, my uncle, many friends, they don't do it. So because I love them and because I miss them dearly, that activates and motivates me to stay on the path, stay on the narrow gate, follow Jesus, follow the Bible. That's it. An individual's heart who's truly seeking and willing to put Christ first, counting the cost, is going to understand that. Someone whose heart is twisted with pride or unwilling to soften and learn is just going to hate you for it. Persecution, it's inevitable. I've sat down with family. I've been like, hey, listen, if we honor our loved ones past, we're just going to follow Jesus. They're screaming from the grave for us to do that. My grandmother once, just screaming at me, you mean to tell me you think Grandpa's in hell? Well, Grandpa was a decent man in many ways. I have fond memories of Grandpa. He was a fun-loving man, but the man was a lawless individual. He didn't particularly like the gospel at all. He was a drunkard, and there were many other things I won't share, but he was not a follower of the Christ. I saw him slowly, depart this earth. Alzheimer's. I saw his last breath. He's not in heaven. You mean to tell me he's not in heaven, but he don't want us to go where he's at? If we love him, if we remember him well, we'll honor him and we'll follow Jesus, because I assure you that's what he wants us to do. Now, sadly, my grandmother, is just an unreasonable individual when it comes to those things. You're going to depart this earth as a Catholic, firmly convinced she's going to go see him again. You can't convince her otherwise. Just can't do it. My other grandma was a very kind, warm, loving woman. But her too. Just no way. No way, Jose. Not going to change. I'm a Catholic. That's it. No Catholic has ever, no Catholic will go to heaven. It's just a solid, absolute, objective truth. And hating the messenger is not going to make it change. It's not going to make it go away. Convincing yourself otherwise and getting angry is not going to change that. It's just not going to do it. You have to humble yourself before God and study. Look, they did this same thing in the first century. Same thing in the first century. Those who, on the day of Pentecost, chose to follow Jesus had to go against the way they were born and raised, the ordinances they had been given, the way their hearts were governed. That was a difficult decision to make, wasn't it? A sacrifice. But, Christ died for us. So, we have to make decisions in life. I made mine. I'm at peace with it. The truth set me free. Can set you free. We have to work at it. We have our struggles. We miss the mark at times. We fall prey to our temptations, and we confess. We try again. We get better. And one thing after the next, you move forward in life, following Christ. But there's no way to heaven in denominationalism. There just isn't. There never has been. All those churches, Jesus never built them. Jesus never built those churches. They don't belong to Christ. Whether I say it or not doesn't matter. It's the truth. Like, even if I didn't exist, that's the truth. It's reality. If I die tonight, if I die tomorrow, it remains the truth. How do we know? What do we do? What do we do? Read the Bible, and read it with the right kind of heart. You read the Bible with the right kind of heart, seeking to understand. I know what's going to happen. If you're over here in this community, I know what's going to happen. You're going to contact the East Coast Church of Christ.ca. You're going to contact me. You're going to contact us. And you will be our honored guest. You'll come study with us and learn with us. I know that's what's going to... I know that. We know that. God knows that. If you're truly, genuinely seeking forgiveness of sins and a peaceful, loving family, comfort, closure, healing, all of it, every upright, good thing, you're going to reach out to us. If you have a humble, seeking heart, because you can't go to heaven without being an active, faithful member of the church that belongs to Christ. There's no way around that. You will not go to heaven outside. Can't do it. Can't do it. So there's, I could have quoted, everything I've said here for an hour and a quarter. Though I've not quoted book, chapter, verse, I've spoken many things learned from book, chapter, verse. And if you want book, chapter, verse, it's very easy to do. I can provide that. And you should read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. You should read it for yourself. It's in the book. Start reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Acts, Romans. But don't read it through a third-party agenda. Don't read it through the lens of denominationalism. Read it for yourself, independent of thought. That's how we were able of being rescued away from those lies. All right, my friends, man, it's been good to see you. It's been good to be with you this evening. Wow, we're at 9 o'clock Atlantic Daylight Time over here. I'm getting tired. It's been a long day. I wanted to kind of test out some stuff, some widgets I had set up, but obviously they're not working. I don't know why. I'll have to tinker about with it a bit further, I suppose. But, yeah, Lord willing, we shall certainly see each other next week, right? Starting the week next week, and we'll go through our process. Seeing you there at 9 a.m. Atlantic Daylight Time. Stay focused and stay positive. You are loved and you are appreciated. Peace out.